Hey everybody, so we're going to continue with the work today. So we got this is next day, stabs and wing sockets are all set up. You can see turned out pretty good. Just a little bit of bead of the polyurethane up on the edge there. Tube goes in and out really nice and smooth. You know, a nice good solid butt up on our end cap there. You know, there's a teeny weeny bit of slop in that socket, but not too bad. Same on the wing. Again, just protruded out just as we had planned for, and again a nice little bit of bead of polyurethane coming out. Now I'm not going to do too much of that at this point because we still got to do the root rib, and we'll do that a bit later. Again, the wing tube, same sort of thing. Nice in, good solid tap on the end of that cap. So we're pretty much set to start doing the next step. So next thing I like to do is mount the stab to the fuse. So we'll go ahead and do that today, or at least get through part of it today. I don't know that we'll get through the whole thing. So to do that, we're going to need to do these two formers here. And we'll get these set up and glued into the back of the fuse, and we'll start the process of getting that stab alignment done. I don't know that it really matters whether you do the stab or the wing first. In the case of the monoplane, on the biplanes I'd usually do the wings first, because you have the wing saddles on the biplanes to get those wings sort of set parallel, and then you can parallel the stab up to them. In this case I'll do the stab up first and get it set perpendicular to the fuse, and then probably tackle the wings second. Okay, so we're getting ready for the next couple steps. So I've gone ahead and I've sanded off the little bit that was sticking out on the root of the stab, so that's now nice and flush. Doesn't have to be like super duper smooth, but close enough to be nice and flush. So that's done. So what I use for those, just a sanding block, aluminum like this. This is a old Great Plain ones from many years ago, some sticky back sandpaper on it. So you can use one of those, or you can make your own. I got a few different size ones. This one is just 2 pieces of extruded angle, aluminum angle, that you can buy at Home Depot or any hardware store, and just glue them together. So in order to get these formers ready, I'm going to lighten them up. So I'm going to take some lightning holes out of these in a little bit, but to do that I want to know where the stab tube and any rotation pin is going to go. So any rotation pin is just a 1/8 inch piece of aluminum rod like that, and that's going to sit eventually on top of that plate in the fuse there. And then this is going to be where my socket's going to go, is across that part there. So the socket's just going to sit right like that. So I want to mark those off so that we don't cut those sections out, so we got something to glue to. So same sort of thing, I got my calipers with the rudder tail post width set up. So I'm just going to set this on the outside of the fuse, and I'm going to mark where on this is going to go. And so that's going to really set my center line. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that to sort of guide my outer boundary here. And these don't have to be perfect. We're going to leave a little bit of meat on the bone here in order to glue these on. So I just take some approximate measurements. So we're not going to cut inside these areas here. They're basically going to be off limits to us. And I'm going to go ahead and draw some lightning holes in all the rest of this, and then we're going to cut them out. I'm also going to do this piece as well, so we'll draw that in there. I usually leave a hole in here for a cable, piece of paper tubing to go through there to capture where the servo leads will go. So you'll see that in a minute. Okay, so I got the lightning holes kind of marked off here in pencil. Really, I left about 5 millimeters kind of on each perimeter. When we put this in, there's going to be some glass work laid in here and a bunch of other stuff, so not too worried about the strength here. Just trying to get rid of some material. This vertical former is going to glue right up at the width. So the width of this lower former, So really we're gonna, I'm gonna set that in, right, match up that width right about there. That's why you'll see that lightning hole kind of stops there. And I didn't really do anything on this side, it's pretty small. And then this piece I'm gonna take the whole middle out, and I'm gonna leave a hole in here for the cable support coming back. So we kind of got one part set up on the scroll saw here. So how do you cut them on a scroll saw? Well, you first got to get a hole in there, and then you basically feed your take your blade out, feed it through the hole, and you're kind of ready to go, and you're going to cut that whole inside part out. This Aproxon scroll saw, you can get them on Amazon. It's super small, variable speed. It's actually a really nice kind of hobby size scroll saw. They make a lot of hobby size benchtop tools. I really like them. So there's the first part cut out. So we're going to go ahead and cut out all the rest of the parts, and then we'll go afterwards and clean these up a little bit. Okay, so now that we got these trimmed up, I'm just going to double check to see that this all makes sense. In the past I've oftentimes put these vertical. In this particular instance, you're going to line this up so essentially the bottom of that socket, is going to sit on top of there. So it's going to sit kind of at the bottom of where the hole in the fuse is going to be. And then really, the anti-rotation pin wants to sit on top of this. So that's kind of, this is not going to be parallel to the stab line. It's going to be slightly inclined. So we're just going to eyeball, basically where that's going to sit. And then this piece, if you actually put it where you marked it, you'll see pretty quick that it's higher than the top of the fuse. So a couple ways: you can either cut it down to lower it so it'll fit, or what I'm going to do is I'm just going to angle it back. So I've already kind of double checked this before I did the video, but I've cut a bit of a bevel on the bottom there, or sanded I should say, and really it's going to sit inclined back a bit to that bevel, just so that our top, from the eyeball clears. Once we dry fit this, we can sand that down and trim it up a little bit, but that's how we'll approach it. I'm not too worried how good this fits. Usually it fits nice and tight through here, and it gives us a good bond. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and glue this up. So basically right on the line where I marked it, I'm going to get as close as I can to that. And essentially with the angle I'd bevel it. Like I said, I didn't get real specific here, but it's going to be close enough, I think. Let's hit that with some CA. And follow through some kicker. Set up super fast. So there's our tail post former now. You can kind of see it's at some funny angle. And we'll go ahead and dry fit that into the fuse. Okay, so I've basically got this ready to go. Now off camera here, I've done a number of dry fits just to fine tune the shape of this. So I have tapered it a bit at the top here, and I have maybe taken just a subtle amount off of each side and tapered this as well, this way just for the fuselage, kind of on an angle like that. So, don't feel bad about, going in, seeing how it fits, taking it out. You might have to do it a bunch, so that's kind of the angle I ended up with. Anyways, I'll show you the final fit. How you get this thing in here, you could go from the front of the fuse, put it in the front and slide it back. But generally there's enough flex in this fuse, you can sort of pry it open and get it in there. And I mean the parts have got a bit of flexibility to them, and again, if the fit isn't super duper critical, you're just going to want it not so tight that you're causing the fuse to protrude out or anything, and not so loose that you don't actually have a good joint to glue up. So essentially what I'm doing is I basically adjust that fit so that wherever that pin goes through, and you can mark lines on the fuse so you can see where that's going to be, but that pin is basically going to be touching the former, and this this part at the back here, where the socket's going to sit in there, the socket's going to sit on top of that former, right? So you essentially kind of want it in that position. So, you know, again, you can eyeball it. We'll fine tune it up here in a little bit, but that's basically how it sits in there. And I'll try to zoom in here. It's hard to get probably a focus right inside there, but we'll see. You can kind of see the top there, how it lives right up into the fuse, right? And so that's going to sit up in there, all the way down, right? And you know, it's going to butt up pretty tight along there. This is why, now hopefully you see, using that piece to set your stab angles was so important. So before we glue the former in, we're going to open up the holes for the stab tube and for the anti-rotation pin. So those are kind of molded in to the fuse. This one's covered up with tape here, just where I've taped it. So what I do with those, I use my little mini Dremel again. This structured, one of these tungsten carbide, like almost looks like a Christmas tree. Super good for cutting any kind of composite materials. Little trick on these Dremels, if you do like them, there's two ones you can get. This is a rechargeable one. There's another one you can get, 30 bucks Canadian, so that's probably like $5 everywhere else. What I do is I actually replace the batteries with Eneloop. So the Eneloop cells, and instead of using alkalines or even the rechargeable one that this one came with, I ripped it apart, this whole thing, yanked it out, and have got Eneloop cells inside. They last forever. I think they're easily way better batteries than anything else, so it works really handy in these little Dremels, and they're super inexpensive. So if you get a set of Eneloops and a decent charger, it's definitely the way to go about doing it. So we'll cut this bad boy up here. So that's that back hole. I just roughed it out. I'm going to finish that up in a bit here with a sanding drum. I'm going to cut through the front one. The front one I just use a little like pointy router tip bit. I'm just going to drive right through that one. Just like that. And that's a 1/8, so there's my anti-rotation pin. It'll be pretty close here. I don't like to make these too loose. I'd rather have them a bit tight. And you know, push that thing in there. There's the anti-rotation pin in the one side. So I'm just going to take a knife here and I'm just going to cut this tape away. And then I'm going to clean this up with a sanding drum. You do not want to get these loose. You want to get as accurate as you can get to the original molded section in here. And then we're going to, you know, dry fit that tube in there. Really that tube just sort of sits inside there, so you don't want to get any bigger than that. Because again, if you make that big and sloppy, you're going to have a much harder time adjusting your stab alignment. So we're going to get that as close as we can get it. There. That's pretty close. I'll dial that in a little bit once I get the other side done. So I'm going to flip it over and do the other side now. Okay, so I got holes in both sides now. I've tweaked them up a little bit. You don't want them loose, so you maybe, I mean, a little bit is okay in that socket, but you just want to be able to kind of go in and out with that tube, you know, without really forcing it right and trying to distort the fuselage. So go ahead and we'll set that centerpiece former back in there, and we're going to start to do a fair bit of dry fit on everything just to see how the alignment's all looking. Okay, so I've went ahead and I've set my anti-rotation pin in there, I've set my stab tube in there, and I've basically positioned this former so that the front's button up against the anti-rotation pin, and the back is up against the tube. You will need to leave a little bit of clearance for the bottom of the tube. However, looking pretty good. Everything seems to line up nice and square. So I just wanted to dry fit this up to show you what kind of I was referring to in the past video and somewhat in this one around the way we set these tubes up. So I've put the stabs on. I've put a 1/4 inch spacer in each root just to take up the gap, because I haven't cut the tube and everything down to size. You know, there'll be the root rib. I'll do that at the very end of the build. When I push them together, I kind of blocked out with foam to hold them in place. But you can see just how bang on that gap will be. Like, it is pretty much exactly to the fuse. And the beauty of this is I did a quick alignment check, basically from each stab tip, right? So from the from the tip up to the center of the fuse at the front, you know, and there, I don't know, it's within probably a 1/16 of an inch, and you know, I haven't even done anything yet. So, you know, there's a little bit of play if you do want to make a slight adjustment, but it should be pretty close. So that's why I do it that way, because I basically get the stab squared up to the fuse perfect on the first try, and then I'll square the wings back to the stab after that. So to do the gluing, which is the fun part of this whole process, how do you know where to glue, I guess, because you got to put the glue in there and then put the former in there, you know. And you could put it in there like this and then try to wedge some glue in there. I like to go in there with a high salt gun and actually put a bead that I can get a good bond with the former. So how I mark it is I make a nifty little tool, basically a sharp pencil, sharpened up, taped to a arrow shaft. So then I can reach in there with that and I can basically draw a line. So I went ahead and done that. Make sure you know which side of the line you're going to glue on. So hopefully you can kind of see it in there. You can see my glue mark line there. So I'm going to glue on top of that line. Right? And then I've also made one for the front former. So we'll use those lines as guides as to where we're going to glue. Now, I do go in here and I'll rough it up with a bit of sandpaper just by hand before I go do that. Try to avoid, obviously, marking up your line. If you are smart, unlike me, you'd probably do that before you drew the line. But either way, it'll work. Okay, so I've done my sanding. One thing I did want to point out, the inside of the fuse is slightly raised where the socket comes through, where the tube comes through. So just, you know, take a little bit off your former where that socket's going to land, just so you don't, so that fuse can get nice and flush coming all the way through that section. So for my glue, I'm using Hysol. I'm going to use 20 HP. So it's about 20-minute work life. If you're not comfortable with that speed, you know, use something 9462 or something with a overnight cure so you got lots of time. I would avoid trying to use 5-minute epoxy or 50-minute epoxy. Do not use polyurethane, my opinion anyways, but you know, the fuse, the polyurethane expands. It could press where your former is and, you know, leave a mark that you might be able to see, say in the sunlight or whatnot, reflection off the fuselage. So I also use a static mixer, a nice long one, so I can reach in there. I mean, this thing almost gets me to the front former, so I don't have to go in too deep. You know, do not be afraid to splay this fuse. It can go pretty far. You know, you can get in there pretty good. So you can open that thing up. You know, you'd be careful a little bit. You don't crack the seams, but you should be able to get that thing open up pretty good to glue it. So I'm going to go ahead and do all this. So now I'm going to pry this open as best I can. And I'm going to try to get this in here without getting glue absolutely everywhere. You try to want to get it wider open than the former itself. Get it all the way down there. And then slide it up into place. Not really a big deal if you get a bunch of glue all over the place. It's got to get on the formers anyways. But the less the better. I like to take my anti-rotation pin, slide it through there just to help set the position of everything. You know, squeeze the sides there, work it, kind of make sure it's worked into the joint. Also set your tube through here. Now you want to leave a slight bit of gap underneath your tube. If you want to take a 16th inch piece of balsa and just slide it underneath there. We're going to make sure that that whole assembly is kind of back where our tail post is going to go. You know, use your calipers to measure that up. Again, make sure it's touching the anti-rotation pin. Now, you might need a bit of help there, just because that glue is sticky when it's in there. Okay, so I think I got it all in place. So, have a look. I'm actually going to kind of bead this a little bit. There's some glue just not in the right spot, so we're going to bead this up. Just fill it a bit with this carbon rod here. Take any excess off as best we can anyways. Yeah, not super crucial. We're going to fiberglass this thing in place in some subsequent steps anyways, so you know, it needs a good bond for now, but we'll really bond it up to the fuse later, so it cannot go anywhere. I'm going to try to fill it around the former here as best you can, push into place. I think we're looking good. Okay, so how do we hold this thing? Now we really want to make sure those fuse sides stay straight, right? So, what I got is 2 square aluminum bars. And we're going to basically run these down the sides like this and clamp them together. Really, I'll put this one on. I won't make it too tight for now. Grab my masking tape. I'll get a few pieces ripped off here first. Really, we're just trying to hold that up. Okay, so I need to make a few more adjustments on this thing. This is why I say don't use 15-minute epoxy. Even the 20 HP is pretty fast. Set time. But I think we pretty much got it there. Come back to it later when it's cured, and then we'll work on the stab alignment, setting the socket in, doing the final fiberglass work, and then really we're kind of done at the tail post end other than the tail wheel mount.